All right. Good afternoon on the East Coast and good morning on the West Coast. And welcome to this news event hosted by the Environmental Entrepreneurs, E2, and the American Council on Renewable Energy, or ACORE for short. You will be hearing from 4 speakers today. And then we will open the floor for questions during the Q&A period. The Q&A period will be for reporters only. And if you wish to ask a question, use the raise your hand function and your line will be unmuted when it's your turn to ask a question. To follow along today, you can find the report and news release on the E2 website. You can go to www.e2.org/reports. Also, a direct link to the report for today's news event will be made available in the chat window shortly. And as I mentioned before, you'll be hearing from 4 speakers today. Our first speaker today will be Bob Keefe, who's the Executive Director of Environmental Entrepreneurs, or E2. Our second speaker today will be Phil Jordan, Vice President of BW Research. Our third speaker today will be Becca Ward, Acting Executive Director of the Clean Energy Leadership Institute, or CELI for short. And our fourth speaker will be Gregory Wetstone, who is the President and CEO of the American Council on Renewable Energy, or ACORE for short. All right, let's begin with our first speaker. That is Bob Keefe, Executive Director of E2.
All right, thank you, Alex, and thanks everybody for taking time to join us today. I am Bob Keefe. E2, if you don't know us, we are a national nonpartisan group of business leaders in every state and across every sector of the economy who advocate for policies that are good for our economy and good for our environment. So some of you may know that for probably about almost 10 years now, E2 has been tracking clean energy jobs and the clean energy economy in a myriad ways. You can find all of our research, including national, sector, state-specific data on clean energy and clean energy jobs at e2.org/reports. What we're releasing today is what I think is one of the most significant reports on clean energy we or anybody has ever done. Now, we've known that clean energy jobs are one of the biggest growing parts of the U.S. economy, employing nearly 3.4 million workers at the end of last year. That's more Americans than work as real estate agents or bankers or school teachers, and 3 times the amount of workers that there are in fossil fuels, by the way. We've known these jobs are growing fast. Clean energy jobs grew about twice the rate of the rest of the U.S. workforce in recent years. And jobs like solar installer, wind turbine technician are among the fastest growing in America, according to Bureau of Labor Statistics. And we've known these jobs are, that clean energy jobs are good jobs. Now we know that just how good these jobs are. And the data that we're about to share with you completely validates and confirms the benefits of focusing on a clean energy economy and on clean energy jobs as we look to build back our economy in the days and months and weeks ahead. Let's go to those slides if we could, please. I'm going to give you a quick overview of what this report shows, and then we're going to open it up for some more detail and, of course, your questions. So what we found in Clean Jobs, Better Jobs is that median wages for clean energy jobs are about 25% higher than the U.S. median. They're more likely to come with health benefits and retirement benefits. They pay better than most fossil fuel jobs, something that might be a little surprising to some of you. Solar and wind jobs pay between $24.50 and $26 an hour, and you can see the differences in other sectors as well. Unionization rates, clean energy jobs, about 9% of them are unionized versus about 6% across the private sector. And of course, as mentioned, they're growing twice as fast as the rest of the economy. Next slide, please. Do it. There we go. There we go. This report breaks down clean energy jobs by all sectors. You'll see this in the report, and it's there on your screen, obviously. We found that the best paying jobs in clean energy are wind energy. They pay about 36% above the U.S. median, followed by grid, modernization, storage. To give you some examples, some of the other sectors of the economy that obviously are hurting since COVID, and there's a lot of focus on, and rightly so, they pay a lot less than these jobs. Retail, trade, accommodations, etc., pay significantly less than the U.S. median. So the message that we'd like to put across is that as we look to rebuild our economy, and if we can focus on clean energy and clean energy policies to do it, we can create a lot of jobs that pay a lot more than the national median. Next slide, please. So we also, as mentioned, compare clean energy across all energy sectors. We know that clean energy has been growing faster. And again, you'll be able to see in this report how it compares to other parts of the energy sector. Next slide. Thank you. We also break down this data by every single state and show the clean energy jobs salaries across as compared to the rest of the economy in all of these states. Quite naturally, or not surprisingly, California is at the top of the list, but look at that chart and you'll see some interesting states in there, I think. Next slide. And one of the coolest things about this, I think, is that we provide detailed data for 15 specific clean energy occupations and how those compare with non-clean energy jobs. We provide education, benefits, data, et cetera, demographics. So, some interesting things to note. Clean energy electricians, for instance. Clean energy electricians, if they work in clean energy, they make about $29 an hour. That's about $2.50 more than they would make across other occupations. Welders, nobody thinks of welders when we think about clean energy, but somebody's got to put the solar arrays and wind turbines up and do all the other things that welders do in clean energy. They make about $16 an hour in clean energy. Across other occupations, it's closer to $14 an hour. So you'll see all this in the report. I want to, do we have another slide or is that it? Next slide. All right, that's the last slide. Good for you guys. So I think I'm going to turn it back over to Alex, and we're going to hear a little more specifics about what the report details from Phil Jordan of BW Research.
Thanks, Bob. Again, that was Bob Keefe, Executive Director of E2. And that takes us to our second speaker. As Bob mentioned, that will be Phil Jordan, Vice President of BW Research. Phil, take it away.
Terrific. Thanks so much. And thank you, Bob, for the introduction. My name is Phil Jordan. I'm the Vice President of BW Research Partnership, and we were really pleased to work on this report with our partners at E2 and ACORE for this important research. I want to pick up on a couple of themes that Bob laid out as he looked at some of the occupations in clean energy, so that we can get a little bit of a sense on the detail on what we're talking about in terms of these wages and benefits. One interesting finding, I think, from this report is that when we look across these occupations, what we see is that these are not magical, mythical, mysterious jobs that nobody knows anything about, right? That while there are some newer titles like solar photovoltaic installer or wind turbine technician, a lot of these jobs are those kinds of positions that Bob was talking about, like electricians and welders. And really, there are a lot of jobs in the clean energy sector that are job titles that we know very well. They just include some specialized skills and certifications. And as the report today, released today, shows, those specialized skills bring with them wage premiums and the ability to earn additional income. So I'm going to give three quick examples just to sort of highlight some of the things that we found so that we can sort of get a sense of this. First is in the HVAC industry. And so, if we think about one of the key drivers for many states' climate goals is the electrification of buildings. And a lot of that is through the installation of air source heat pumps. Now, air source heat pumps are installed by HVAC contractors, but those contractors require some specialized training to properly install and service those systems. That's often in the form of a manufacturer's certification, and it's often required in order for the consumer to be able to take advantage of any rebates or incentives for those systems. So with that certification, you get a lot of benefits. The first thing is for the company that employs that worker, they now can expand their service lines, not only for the installation of these products that are growing in popularity, but also for the ongoing service and maintenance of those systems. For the worker, it expands and diversifies what they're able to do. And because they carry this additional certification and can make their company more profitable, they earn a higher wage. And we see across the country that premium can be anywhere from $1 to $3 an hour, which, you know, in these industries can translate to $10,000 or $15,000 a year in additional income, which is pretty substantial, we think. Bob mentioned welders, and there's some others like pile drivers and construction laborers. And we see some of the wage premiums that are currently in existence for those clean energy workers. But one of the things that we're keeping our eye on to the future that we're actually really excited about in terms of wages, unionization rates, and other key benefits is the proliferation of offshore wind, particularly along the East Coast. And as we see these procurements of offshore wind increase across the eastern states in particular, what we're seeing is requirement for a significant number of highly specialized and skilled tradespeople. And that does include folks like welders and electricians and pile drivers and construction laborers. And those individuals will not only need some specific skills around those technologies, but they'll also need some extra safety training to work at sea and to work at height. That will also have a beneficial effect on their wages and pay an even higher premium than what we see today. And then finally, I'd just note in the electric vehicle sector, one of the keys that we've seen as these vehicles really are growing in popularity, and there are some projections for significant increases in deployment. There are two critical technology advancements that have made that possible. One is around battery technology, and the other is in lightweighting, which really applies to all types of vehicles to increase the economy and the distance they can travel per unit of energy. Those advances are being done by scientists, by engineers, and by others who are working on the innovations that are necessary in order to bring us closer to the technologies that make it easier for states to reach those climate goals and for consumers to have more choices. So those are obviously high wage, high growth occupations. And those are just some examples of the types of occupations that are really fueling this growth and these higher than average wages. So we have a lot of detail in the report. We hope that you'll read through the profiles and certainly ask any questions that you have. But just keeping an eye on time, I think I'll conclude my formal remarks here and pass it back over to the moderator.
Thanks, Phil. Again, that was Phil Jordan, Vice President of BW Research. That takes us to our third speaker today, which is Becca Ward, Acting Executive Director of CELI. Becca.
Excellent. Thank you, Alex. And thank you, Bob and Phil, for kicking this off. As Alex mentioned, my name is Becca Ward. I'm with the Clean Energy Leadership Institute, or CELI. For those of you that don't know, CELI is a nonprofit dedicated to creating a new kind of energy leadership. We believe that having a connected community of diverse energy professionals across sectors, across disciplines, and across the industry is essential to driving the transition to an equitable, resilient, and decarbonized energy future. So I'm pleased to be here today because this report confirms what emerging leaders and emerging professionals already know, that the future of energy is clean energy, and that the transition to a decarbonized energy economy can provide countless careers, countless opportunities, and pathways. We work across sectors and across silos in the clean energy space on many of the industries that Phil and Bob mentioned, from offshore wind to transportation to utility space. And we know that this report also highlights in many ways that we're still at the beginning. We're at the precipice of a massive transition that will touch almost every sector. And in that potential, we at CELI and with our partners here believe that we must work collaboratively to ensure that these economic benefits and opportunities are developed and realized in every community, especially in communities of color, in the Black, Latinx, and Indigenous communities that have been so disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, just touched on a little bit in the report, and in the deindustrialized communities who are looking towards future industries, future careers, and future opportunities. With the opportunity to invest in this economic recovery, in public health, and in climate mitigation, this report provides key insights into how we build back a more just and more equitable economy and energy future. We're excited to continue this work with our partners to help make that a reality. And Alex, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great. Thanks, Becca. Again, that was Becca Ward, Acting Executive Director of CELI. And that takes us to our fourth and final speaker today, which is Gregory Wetstone. Gregory's the President and CEO of ACORE.
Thanks very much, Alex. I am delighted to be able to join today. Appreciate everyone who dialed in. Want to send my sincere appreciation to Bob Keefe, Phil Jordan, and the folks at BW Research for a really important report. This is, to my knowledge, the first serious effort to really take a deep dive into employment in the clean energy sector and how we stack up nationally against other segments of the economy. And as head of the American Council on Renewable Energy, which is an organization dedicated to accelerating the transition to a renewable energy economy, it's really encouraging to see how we stack up. Jobs in the solar industry averaging $24.48 an hour, pay 28% above the national median wage. Jobs in the wind industry pay nearly $26 an hour, beating the national minimum wage by fully 36%, the national median wage, if I didn't say that right. The average wind and solar job pays better than the average fossil fuel job. About 80% of both solar installers and wind turbine technicians receive healthcare coverage from their employers, which is about 20% better than the national private sector average. So these are jobs that pay better and have better benefits. They're also all the more attractive because they're jobs that involve directly addressing our growing climate risk, and surveys show, not surprisingly, that this is important to younger generations. I'd point to a recent Morning Consult poll of members of Generation Z is a pretty good documentation of that, but it's certainly no surprise. These jobs also grow more rapidly than the rest of the economy, historically at twice the rate in recent years, 6% versus 3%. But I would be remiss to not emphasize the hard-hitting impacts the pandemic has had on the renewable sector. The latest monthly analysis of federal unemployment data that we've done with E2 and BW Research documents that more than 13% of renewable workers lost their jobs since the pandemic began in March. If we're serious about rebuilding our economy, getting America back to work with high quality jobs, we call on policymakers to enact common sense emergency relief measures that will get renewable energy workers back to these good paying jobs so they can continue to build the clean energy future that Americans want and deserve. That means, more specifically, we're calling for temporary refundability for renewable tax credits so projects can be completed despite a COVID constrained tax equity market that makes finance more difficult. And we're calling for a delay in the scheduled phase down of existing tax credits for renewable power, in recognition of the adverse nationwide impact the pandemic has had in hampering renewable deployment this year. History shows that with the right policies in place, the renewable industry can put people to work powering our nation's economic recovery, as we did in 2009, and play a critical role in achieving the greenhouse gas emission reductions scientists say are necessary to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. So let's get going. With that, happy to turn back to the moderator and look forward to your questions.
Great. Thank you, Greg. Again, that was Gregory Wetstone, President and CEO of ACORE. And that takes us to the Q&A portion of the call. As I said before, if you wish to ask a question, use the raise your hand function and your line will be unmuted when it is your turn to ask a question. As a reminder, the Q&A period is for reporters only. If you are having issues with your own audio or the raise your hand function, you may also use the text space Q&A box, and we'll try to do our best to get to all of those questions in the text box. But obviously we will be taking all of the live questions first. While we're waiting for our first question, I do want to mention that a video recording of this news event will be made available online at the E2 website. Again, that's www.e2.org. All right, let's take our first question. Our first question is from Greg Ip of the Wall Street Journal. Greg, please unmute yourself. You're now live.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, good. Two questions. Phil, the first question for you is a measurement question about how you did the research. When you have job occupations which can cross industries, for example, an installer or a welder might work in renewable but might work in something else, how are you able to distinguish those that were working in renewable energy versus something else? Because obviously some of these jobs and occupations are fungible. My second broader question is, do you have a theory about why these jobs pay more?
Sure, thanks, Greg. To your first question, the methodology that we use incorporates both existing data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics as well as a comprehensive survey that was a supplement to the U.S. Energy Employment Report from the end of last year. And so the way that we make the distinction for those who work across different technologies is that we identify those who spend a majority of their time working in a clean energy technology as opposed to something else. So yes, there is some overlap, but the methodological sort of distinction is made by whether or not they spend a majority of their time with the clean energy technology. In terms of the theory as to why the jobs pay more on an occupation by occupation basis, is generally that across these sectors there is an additional requirement that or skill requirement or skill level that is not necessarily needed in some of the other sectors. And sort of as the HVAC example, if you're installing Viessmann or Rinnai high efficiency systems, or Trane or Mitsubishi or Fujitsu air source heat pumps, you generally need to have a manufacturer's certification and some additional training. Sort of tuning and maintaining and making sure that those systems are working at optimal performance tends to take an additional layer. And many HVAC technicians simply won't service those types of, maybe you could call them higher tech, but high efficiency systems. And so when you have that certification, you can command a premium in the marketplace. We certainly are also seeing, as the offshore wind sector is starting to, I guess, become more real, right after the small system completion in Rhode Island, and a lot of procurement going on now particularly in the Northeast U.S. and across the Mid-Atlantic. We are seeing the outline of what some of the project labor agreements are looking like, and what the prevailing wages will be, and those are certainly significantly higher than the wages for those occupations that we see across the economy writ large.
Thank you, Greg, for your question. Let's move on to our next question here. This is Jim McGill from S&P Global. Jim, please unmute yourself. You're now live.
Yes, hi. Yes, I'm no longer with S&P Global. I'm currently working as a independent freelance writer. My question is, does the study take into effect the consequences of the presidential election? Obviously, we have two different candidates with two different philosophies of clean energy. And have you looked at that and gained that out as to what would happen under a Biden administration as opposed to a Trump administration?
This is Bob Keefe. I can take that one, Jim. I think, and I'll answer it by saying that as a nonpartisan nonprofit group, we don't look at politics and we don't talk about electoral politics, not in this report or anything we do. That said, I think it's really important as we're hearing a national narrative and we're hearing from lawmakers both in Washington and in states across the country that are looking to rebuild our economy after this devastating downturn in the wake of COVID-19. What I think this report shows and what this data shows clearly is that if we do look at building our economy back with smart, clean energy policies that support more growth in renewables, that support energy efficiency, weatherizing homes, et cetera, that supports investments in clean energy R&D and everything from the next PV and wind technology, of course, but also energy efficiency technologies, battery technology, et cetera. If we look at investing and directing our policies at the federal and state level at clean energy, we're going to create a lot of jobs. And these are going to be good paying jobs that pay 25% better than the national median. And according to another report that E2 put out with others a couple months ago called Build Back Better Faster, with an economic stimulus at the federal level that's about equivalent to what we did in 2009 at the federal level in terms of investments in clean energy, we can create something like 850,000 jobs, drive about $320 billion in economic growth pretty quickly. So again, we don't look at partisan politics, but we do know that smart clean energy policies at the national and the state level will drive clean energy jobs and create a lot of them that, again, pay pretty well.
Yeah, I would just, Bob said it well, and I would just echo and emphasize that the clean energy sector helped the economy grow through the downturn in 2009 and 2010, and we can do it again. And the data is here now that not only do we know these is a rapidly growing sector in terms of the ability to create jobs, but these are good jobs that pay well and compare well with other segments of the nation's economy.
I'll just add one other thing, and it's kind of throughout this report, but in a lot of other research we've done as well. Look, what we know is that clean energy jobs, these aren't red state jobs. They're not blue state jobs. These are red, white, and blue jobs. They're available in every state in the country. They're available in 99% of U.S. counties, according to our research and the great work of BW Research. And they're available to folks from every sector, every walk of life, regardless of education level. And they're jobs that don't depend on geology. They don't depend on geography. And again, they don't depend on politics.
Okay, before we take our next question, I just want to make sure that reporters on the line know how to pose a question. If you wish to ask a question, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen. Your line will be unmuted when it is your turn to ask a question. As a reminder, the Q&A period is for reporters only, and if you are having issues with your audio or the raise your hand function, you may also use the text-based Q&A box, and we'll try our best to get to all of the text-based questions. All right, let's take our next question. Our next question is from Adam Siegel, who is from Get Energy Smart Now. That is Adam Siegel. You are now live.
So thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank you already for in the report, the limited I've looked at it, but your comments now are some of the clearest, most cogent examples of why, not just that they pay better, but why they pay better. That certification comment, it's a nice, clean explanation for why. So thank you for that to start with. Have a bunch of questions for my limited read, but I'm going to sort of do two that are two of them that maybe you can address. So the Biden plan for Build Back Better includes prevailing wage and union requirements that are built into it. Can you give some thoughts about how that might actually change or, even greater increase the salary impacts of clean energy jobs versus, let's say, fossil foolish ones or the general economy? And then also from the report, there's a page in there that uses basically the 2009 stimulus package, the $100 billion that went to clean energy, as sort of a surrogate of what the jobs impact would be. If we put a $99 billion in today, what might be the jobs impact? Well, the Biden plan, Build Back Better, is proposing $2 trillion. Not all of that is clean energy, but it's substantially more than that. Do you have, from your analytical perspectives from doing this work, just how many jobs you think would be created if that plan were executed? Thank you.
This is Bob Keefe. That second part is probably maybe for Phil Jordan. I'll take a stab at the first part and say once again that we can't talk partisan politics, and we don't talk partisan politics because clean energy and jobs should not be a partisan issue. One of the things that we found in this report, as you'll see, is that the unionization rates are pretty good across clean energy. 6% compared to 9% across the entire private sector. That number.
That reverse, Bob. 9% clean energy, 6%.
You're right. Thank you, Greg. 9% clean energy, 6% across the private sector generally. But that unionization rate varies from job to job. Some jobs, obviously, in clean energy have higher unionization rates than others. While we're not going to comment on any political candidate's platform, I think what's important is that as policymakers and lawmakers, whoever they are, begin to develop and begin to push forward more policies to get our economy going again with clean energy, that we really need to make sure that these jobs continue to pay good prevailing wages. And we need to make sure that these jobs are available to everybody in the economy and that these opportunities are available in communities of color, LMI communities. And the good news is what we found and what you'll see in that report from some of the descriptions of the specific occupations, there's no reason why that can't happen. But again, as we begin to develop policies and hopefully move them a little quicker to get our economy going, we need to make sure we look at things like prevailing wages and to make sure that these jobs continue to be some of the best paying in the country.
Yeah, and thanks for the questions, Adam. I will just sort of echo what Bob said, and again, without taking a position one way or another on it. I can tell you that there is a very, very strong correlation between union representation, the percentage of the workforce represented by union, and wages, right? So there's a very, very strong positive correlation between union representation and wages. So a policy that increases unionization rates in the industry would be likely to, as you suggest, impact the salaries of clean energy jobs. Even more greatly. And I think we're starting to see some of examples of that in that many of the project labor agreements, or many of the offshore wind procurements include project labor agreements that have substantially higher wages as a result. In terms of the 2009 era clean energy money, if you look at the Build Back Better and Faster report that was released in July, we looked at a suite of policies that did include a lot of what was in ARRA, but also included some other new ideas. largely focused around grid modernization, energy efficiency, and expansion of renewables. And so those would be updated. And it is a fairly linear process in terms of how jobs are created, because it's sort of a dollars per job analysis. So you could look at that report and take a look at those multipliers and sort of enter in the numbers at your choice. Now, that's not modeled after the specifics of the Biden-Harris plan. That is a suite that was developed by a lot of policy experts and through a lot of third-party vetting and discussions, again, outside of the political arena. But that would give you a pretty good sense there. Generally speaking, you're going to get a bit more bang for your buck in 2020 than in 2009, and that has a lot to do with the rapidly declining cost of product, right? So solar panels, batteries, all these different elements are a lot less expensive per unit measure than they were over a decade ago. So you're likely to get an even greater bang for your buck per dollar, and so expanding that would be, a multiplier on top of that.
All right, let's take our next question. Our next question comes from Alan Off of Cronkite News. Alan, please unmute yourself.
Hi, yes, thank you. So my first question goes back to one of the slides that Bob was showing earlier on, the top 10 states by clean energy wage. I was just wondering, my first question is, are those top 10 states, is that showing jobs that currently exist, or are those for future jobs? And my second question is, can we expect to see Arizona to host a good amount of future renewable jobs?
Well, I'm going to ask Phil to help me out on the specifics, but the chart that you saw, I think, showed that, and it's in the report, obviously, top states by clean energy wage as a percentage above the state median wages. So those are existing jobs in those states, existing clean energy jobs compared with the statewide median wage across the entire economy in those states. Arizona, it sounds like you're particularly interested in. Arizona is number 10 on that list with about almost 15% premium for clean energy jobs than there are than the pay for jobs across the entire state economy. Is Arizona going to continue to create those jobs? I hope so. I think that's up to your policymakers, your lawmakers in the state of Arizona. Obviously, it is a fantastic place for solar and for wind, and it's a fantastic place for energy efficiency. Arizona has nowhere to go but up and better in creating new, good-paying jobs in clean energy, but we need the policy drivers to make that happen. Phil, am I missing anything on those numbers, or anybody else want to chime in?
I think the way it's laid out in the report, and we didn't have room for all of it in the slides, is that we have sort of a side-by-side. One is the absolute numbers that shows the rankings of pay, and then the other is sort of is that percent over median wage, which is what you saw. And they're not exactly the same because obviously we want to control for states that have higher median wages. So we have both in the report. I would just lay that out. If you look at the report, you can see both of them. And I like your comment, Bob, on Arizona. One thing that we have determined over the course of the last decade doing this work is that policy really does matter, and state policy matters a lot. And so it's, when we're asked to make predictions about the future, we tend to think about the current state of things, and then you can model scenarios based on what might happen. And a lot of that is dependent on policy.
Great, thank you.
Okay, we want to make sure that reporters on the line have one last opportunity to ask questions. As a reminder, if you would like to ask a question, use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen, and your line will be unmuted when it is your turn to ask a question. As a reminder, the Q&A period is for reporters only. If you are having issues with your audio or the raise your hand function, you may also use the text-based Q&A box, and we'll try to get to those questions as well. All right, we do have an additional question. Just a second. Our next question is from Scott Hunter with the Grand Coulee Washington Star. Scott?
Good morning. Grand Coulee, you might guess, excuse me, is the home of the Grand Coulee Dam. So I'm interested in hydropower, which is the hydro is mentioned exactly twice in the whole report. One as a asterisk, and another for hydrogen. So I'm guessing it didn't really figure in too much, but I was wondering, Washington is listed in that clean energy jobs pay 25% more than national median. It's right in the middle there, and I'm wondering if those jobs, it's a $25.39 average, included hydropower. We have a lot of hydropower here.
Yeah. This is Bob Keefe. Scott, thanks for the question. Once again, I'm going to rely on my crutch, Phil Jordan here, but I think we only tracked low impact hydro jobs as clean energy jobs throughout this report and in our other reports. And as far as the median wages that you'll see for Washington State, a lot of that, I believe, is probably going to be wind and solar and energy efficiency. Phil, do I have that right?
Yeah, you do. There are big differences across the states in terms of what gets included in a renewable portfolio standard. And there are a number of states, like Massachusetts and some other East Coast states in particular, that only include certified low impact hydro as part of their RPS. And in order to maintain consistency, we do sort of stick to the more stringent or stricter definition of what gets included.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Greg Wetstone just jumping in, and it doesn't help you in the data, but I just want to say that from our perspective, we do consider hydro to be fully part of the renewable sector. And I'd add it's all about climate, and hydro is carbon free, pollution free, and part of the renewable world in our view. So
if I could just follow up with one other question along that same hydro line. There's growing interest in hydro storage projects. And I'm wondering if those storage projects are included in the storage part of your data.
They are.
Okay.
So the storage, it's still fair, in terms of when you think about, like the Gigafactory in Nevada with something like 10 or 11,000 jobs, right? The pumped hydro storage is a bit smaller in most places, but yes, it is included. It's just sort of currently a smaller segment, and it is included in storage, not in hydroelectric gen.
Great. All right, it looks like we don't have any. Oh, looks like we have one additional question. That is from David Clark.
Yes, hi. Thank you very much. I am interested in, there's been a discussion about green recovery and building back better that's been going on for some time. What's the status of that discussion in Congress, and when do you anticipate a bill would address specifics of building back better with a green economy for anybody?
Can I jump in on
Yeah,
that?
Greg. Yeah, please.
Well, there's sort of two levels of response to that. One is sort of as part of COVID emergency relief. Looks pretty dim for getting a COVID relief package before the election, just based on what we're seeing in terms of statements, particularly from Senate Majority Leader McConnell recently. In terms of the lame duck session, which is the period after the election before a new president or new members of Congress would be sworn in January, and we'd have a new Congress. in that period, which would probably be kind of mid-late November, early December. I think there is a possibility, but it's very hard to handicap depending on the results. I think that would be more in the vein of emergency relief. Not sure how much kind of stimulus investment, which is really what Build Back Better is really about, we'd see in a lame duck. What comes after that really depends on, obviously, the election. If the gavel were to change hands in the Senate and we were to see a Biden presidency, I think there is good reason to anticipate that you would see a major initiative focusing on rebuilding infrastructure. And I think clean energy could be a very big part of that. And the time frame for that, again, election dependent, but would probably be in the early months of 2021, late January, February, March, probably a lot of activity in an effort to get this economy flowing and back on its feet again.
And Greg, I might just add, if I could, beyond the Beltway, regardless of what happens in Washington, the good news is that a lot of states are already taking some significant action to meet their own climate goals, among other things. California obviously is at the top of the list, passing recently policies to put solar.
You're muted, Bob.
Sorry, Greg. Thanks for that. Hopefully you can hear me now. I was just going to add real quick, regardless of what happens inside the Beltway and at the federal level, the good news is across the country, states are taking some serious and substantive steps to meet their own climate goals, and to do it because they realize that it's also an economic development issue, that they're able to create jobs and get people back to work. California obviously is at the top of the list with policies that do everything from require solar on all new houses to phasing out fossil fuels in cars and now heavy duty trucks. But we're seeing other policies like this all across the country as well. North Carolina's clean energy plan, for instance, is a great example. Virginia's doing something similar. In the Northeast, we have this transportation climate initiative that's going to hopefully make a big difference. And of course, in states like New York and Colorado and others, they've realized the importance of clean energy, not just for the environment and for climate, but for jobs and economic growth. And so hopefully we'll see continued growth in the states, regardless of what happens in Washington. But as Greg points out, it's mighty key what's going to happen in the next few weeks and also in Congress in the months ahead.
Thank you, David, for your question. We do have time for one last follow-up question from Adam Siegel. Adam, you're now live.
So thank you. A question of, in terms of workforce, what are really the bottlenecks? Or if I had $1 to spend on workforce development or otherwise, where should we apply it? I'll do a quick example. About a decade ago, when wind was really exploding, there was sort of a joke in Iowa that somebody got a job simply signing up at the community college for wind training because they were so short, even before they graduated, they were having good jobs. Not a single graduate left without getting employment. In the workforce, where really are the gaps or places that we need to be focusing on to try to make the sector work better?
I'll take a quick stab at that. This is Bob Keefe with E2. Certainly when, and Phil once again can back me up here, I think, but when Phil and his team and we do surveys of businesses around the country that work in clean energy, one of the biggest issues they say as an impediment to hiring is training and education. So I would suggest that you're hitting it right on the head, Adam. We need better training and workforce development policies both at the national level and at the state level. Phil
And
or
I would
anybody
just-
else?
I would just echo here. If we're talking about sort of the best path forward for impacting the economy writ large and building back and sort of not just back to where we were, but really thinking about sort of a renaissance and growth and getting back on track, we're going to need to not only get the existing folks who are in the labor market who may have lost their job in a clean energy during COVID-19. And as a result of COVID-19, we're also going to need a lot of other people who could transition. And there are two populations at least that I think we could look at. And one is those folks who currently work in fossil industries that may be historically in decline or projected to decline over the coming years, and looking at what many people are calling a just transition. And then also critically, I think we need to start identifying populations and folks who have not participated fully in this clean energy economy. So, Becca had some great talking points there about diversity and inclusion, and it's going to be tough, I think, to fill all of these jobs if we don't do a better job expanding and investing and thinking about connecting with communities who have traditionally been underrepresented in clean energy. So I don't know, Becca, if you have anything additionally that you wanted to say about that, but I think that's a really important note.
Yeah, I think that there's two pathway issues. A lot of what we've talked about with the training and access to get into some of the jobs more highlighted in the report, but there's also the need to bring folks from the oil and gas transition, like Phil mentioned, and also just from all the other industries. If you talk about the need to integrate and systemize our grid build out and our clean energy economy, you need folks that are coming from all the different professions into clean energy as well, and especially that are bringing diverse perspectives. So I think there's a twofold problem or a twofold opportunity for these type of employment transitions, both from the fossil fuels. You think of geothermal as a very clear transitional opportunity. You've seen this a lot in Houston, which is the energy capital of the world that's trying to become the sustainability capital. And I think that's where we'll see a lot of that opportunity and industry shift.
Well, I believe that's our last question for the day. We just want to make sure that you know where to get more information following today's news conference. To connect with any of the speakers that you've heard from today, or to get more information, you can contact Alex Frank at 703-276-3264 or afrank@hastingsgroup.com. A recording of this news event and the related media materials are now available online at the E2 website. You can go directly to www.e2.org/reports. Also, if you'd like access to any of the visuals or graphics that you've seen today, or additional graphics from the report, you can also contact Alex Frank and he can help facilitate that. I want to thank all of our participants and especially our speakers today for joining us. Obviously, this was a news event that was sponsored by E2 and ACORE, and that concludes today's news event. Thank you very much, everyone.
Big thanks all.
Thanks, everybody.